I got to do that now. Okay. All right. I think I figured it out. Sorry. They changed OBS again, and I'm still trying to sort it all out. So we'll get over to the chat in a minute. I'm just going to sit here and hold. There we go. All right. Sounds good. Sounds good. So yes, good evening. It's Tuesday evening, 7 o'clock in the Mountain Time Zone. Daylight savings time should be outlawed, and we ought to just stay on this time. One of the things I liked about Arizona. I usually chat for just a minute here, let people kind of get logged in and catch up to us. And so, yeah, let's see who all's in the chat tonight. Scotty and Tom and George, a.k.a. Dad, are here, as is Eric Myers. Good to see you, Eric. Let's see. I don't want to miss somebody. Oh, yeah. Let's see. Oh, it looks like Bruce, Vincent RV Life's checking in. Hi, Bruce. Tim Myers is here. Robert Black, 1911, coming from Texas. Judy Kimbrough's in. Hi, Judy. So nice to see you tonight. Okay, so we're going to talk about tonight extending the lifespan of your RVs, flooded lead acid, and lithium batteries. And so what we're going to chat about is I'm going to give you sort of my list of things that I think are important to extend the life of your batteries. And then, of course, in the chat, I would definitely like to hear from you guys as to what you do. Maybe is different, maybe is better than what I'm suggesting. And so that would be very helpful. Basically, what I'm doing is that I'm preparing articles for my website that I'm using you to help me write, essentially. And the article that came out of last week has turned out really nice, and it should be loaded and on my website here. I'm thinking probably Thursday, maybe Friday. I got a lot going on because I've been drug out of retirement. Well, the long short story is a friend of mine here locally who runs a larger real estate office, real estate sales office, they're relocating and they needed some help. They wanted somebody that could come in and help them move their tech. And one of my past lives, that's exactly what I did, was in addition to moving offices for the company I worked for, as one of my functions was moving data centers and stuff like that, and offices. And so she knew that and has cajoled me and drugged me out of retirement. So I'm going to be working on that project. It won't be, it's not going to be a lot of work. There's not a lot of people to move and stuff like that. But I'll be working on that for the next 2 or 3 weeks, waiting for spring, because typical spring weather is here in Idaho. And we had about 3 inches of snow on the ground this morning. And by 2 o'clock, it was gone. So, hi, Judy White. It's nice to have you here. Next week, we're going to cover a topic suggested by Tom Downey, and what you can or can't carry across the border in your RV, like if you're headed to Mexico or Canada. Okay, and so that'll be next week's topics. That'll be next week's topic, is that. I would like to get some suggestions from you all as to future topics that you would like to see me cover. So if you wouldn't mind throwing a suggestion over in the chat window. If you're shy and you don't want to chat live online, you can do so by sending me an email to trbolin, BOWLIN, @gmail.com. Okay? So yeah, if you have something that you'd like to see me cover, please drop a comment over in the chat window or send me an email. So let's go ahead and get started on this week's topic. Let me make a few organizational changes to my screens here. Oh, by the way, I was going to mention this too. This is something that, well, it just something that popped into my head while I'm cleaning up my screens here. If you haven't watched Hidden Figures, I think it's on like RVing, that's Amazon's free streaming service. Check it out. It's definitely worth it. Okay, so I'm assuming everybody can see this document okay. If you can, give me a thumbs up or let me know. And so I've started to kind of sketch out an article here that will run on my website here in the next 2 to 3 weeks around extending the life of your flooded lead acid or your lithium batteries. And so I thought we would talk about the flooded lead acid batteries first. These are in no particular order. I haven't sat down and said this is the most important, this is the least important. I'll do that when I get into the deeper parts of organizing this. But one of the first things, of course, is to charge those batteries regularly and keep them fully charged whenever possible. I'll just run them down, then we'll go back and talk about each of them. Use an appropriate charger to detect your battery's charge state, I'll get it. Use an appropriate charger capable of detecting your battery's charge state and adjusting the charging voltage and current based on the charge state. Now, 99.999% of all battery chargers do this, and we'll chat more about that in a minute. I think a big step that a lot of people miss, especially on flooded lead acid batteries, is to perform a regular equalization every 3 to 6 months to balance out the charge levels of the cells. We'll chat some more about that in a bit. Obviously, another overlooked thing is to check the water level in each cell regularly and top them up with distilled water. When possible, store your batteries in a cool, dry place, and as mentioned before, keep them fully charged when not in use. You should protect against corrosion by cleaning the battery terminals and applying a corrosion inhibitor, or petroleum jelly works really well as well to the terminals and the cable connections. On lead acid batteries, this might be the most important, and that is to avoid over discharging your batteries by being mindful of your power usage and turning off non-essential appliances when not in use. Another way to maintain and extend them is to use solar panels to keep your batteries charged and topped off when you're on the road or you're in storage. Oh, it looks like I got cool. Keep the batteries cool in there twice. We'll get rid of that. And then you want to monitor the battery's health regularly by checking each cell's specific gravity and overall state of charge. I'd recommend doing that at least once or twice a year, and we'll review that idea in just a minute. When we go over and we look at lithium batteries, again, charging the batteries regularly and keeping them fully charged is always a great idea. To use a lithium-specific charger to detect the battery state and adjust the charging voltage. That's super important for lithium batteries because, as we've talked about in the past on this channel, the charging characteristics between lithium and lead acid, and that includes AGM when we talk about lead acid batteries, are different than what they should be for a lithium battery. And in many cases, most inverter chargers and some converters are capable of setting the charging characteristics of the battery. And as we learned a couple weeks ago from our good friend Jim, he had just purchased a automatically detecting converter for his RV, and it automatically detected what type of battery you had and then sets up the charger appropriately. I did a little bit more digging into that, And it turns out that it measures the first charge cycle that you attach the converter to the battery set, the battery pack. And it determines what type of battery it is based on the way they charge. There's a lot more goes into it, and we could chat about that later now that I've done some more research on that. As always, keep those batteries cool. Avoid over discharging. Using a battery management system, typically all lithium, almost all, not all, but almost all lithium batteries have some sort of battery management system that's going to help prevent over discharging, overcharging, overcurrent, all of the bad things that can happen to lithium batteries, and are key to the safety of a lithium battery. And good battery management systems, BMSs built into the batteries, has what has really enabled lithium to move into the portable power market, RVs, and those sorts of things. Store batteries in cold, dry place. And by the way, and I guess I didn't know this. I guess I did or I didn't know this, but I'm not sure. But when you store lithium batteries, obviously they should be disconnected and preferably taken out of your RV if you're in a cold climate. That goes with lead acid too. But to keep them in a partially charged state around 50% when not in use for extended periods. Extended period would be over the winter. I've got a query out to Battleborn's tech support. They answer every question no matter how goofy it is. And whether it's related to their batteries or not, they're great people. And so I sent them a question about that. Just hoping to understand a little more about why a partially charged state is better than keeping them fully charged when you've got them in storage. I see a mistake here. Obviously, I copied lead acid to this, and we don't want that, and that's good. And then, of course, monitoring the battery health. Okay, so let me just slip over here to the chat window real quick, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about each of those topics as time permits. Scotty says, okay, we'll get to your question in a bit, Scotty. Judy, it's nice to have you as a part of the group. Thanks, Robert. Yeah, I always... the engineering company I worked for many years, and it's always been good policy, is to make hay when the sun's shining. And so I thought I'd make a little hay. Besides, to be honest with you, I'm kind of tired of working on RV and YouTube and all the other things I'm doing here. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Hi, Gary D's made it in. Hi, Gary. So good to see you. Tom Downey says his coach house batteries are 4 lithiums driven by Victor Charger, Gen, dongle, etc. That's good. Yeah, that's what I had in my Class A. Yes, Gary, we did talk about that, and I was going to mention that Gary has a new video out on an inverter that he was playing with over on his channel, and I will get the link and post it towards the end of the stream here. So you can go over and check out Gary's channel. Make myself a little note here so I don't forget. Yeah, Tom says their batteries are self-leveling. They stay at 14.2. Yeah. Gary D, you're talking about place to share chat. Yeah. Good evening to Ed Weiss, EJ Weiss, excuse me. Kevin Coop. The lithium batteries for his RC trucks say to have the charge at 50% for storage periods. The charger will discharge them for storage. Ah, interesting. Yeah, I was thinking about the logistics of charging or discharging the batteries or getting them to somewhere between 50 and 60% to put them in storage, at least on lithiums. Excuse me for just a moment. Okay, so let's cycle back to this document here. And My head's chopped off. Let's fix that. There we go. Okay, so always a good idea is to keep your batteries regularly charged when they're lead acid and keep them fully charged. Now, reason for that is that a lead acid battery, when it's not fully charged, is susceptible to something called sulfation. What sulfation is that in the chemical reaction inside of a lead acid battery, the sulfate is one of the molecules moving back and forth in the electrolyte, sulfuric acid, okay? Has a lot of sulfates. But what can happen is that as the battery discharges, and if it sits in a low charged state for a long period of time, those sulfates, sulfur, can attach to the plates, to the lead plates in the battery, and it basically plugs up the plates so there are not as many sites for the reaction to take place that either stores or discharges electricity. So that's the main reason you want to keep a lead acid battery charged up, is because of sulfation. Sulfation will kill a battery really fast, and oftentimes in a deeply discharged battery, below 50% in lead acid batteries, is when sulfation really starts to happen, is one of the main driving forces that kills a lead acid battery when it's discharged to below 50%. So the same rule doesn't apply to lithium. Lithium batteries, typically you can discharge them all the way down to zero or close to zero. And the battery management system will act to protect that battery so that it doesn't completely discharge. Lead acid batteries are dumb. Lithium batteries are smart. So a lead acid battery doesn't have the capability to turn itself off when it gets below a certain point. You have to have electronics in the stream to do that for you, and then you want to recharge it as quick as possible. Just checking in on the chat there. If you've just signed in or you're just joining us, please sure and drop a note over in the chat and let me know if you have a topic you'd like to see me cover in 2 weeks. Next week, topic suggested by Tom Downey is what to or not to carry across the border when you're crossing in your RV. I've chosen Mexico and the United States. Obviously, those are probably the two most obvious borders that we might cross, and I've been doing some research on that. And it's actually pretty interesting, so they should be an interesting stream next week. And then for the following week, I have one I think I might be ready with, but I would sure love to hear your ideas on stuff you'd like to hear me cover. Okay, now when we talk about equalizing a lead acid battery, inside of a lead acid battery, there are actually individual 2-volt cells, okay? In a 12-volt battery, there are 6 of those 2-volt cells. You don't see them because they're covered by the outside case of the battery. But inside of that, you'll see that there are 2-volt cells. Each cell has a fill hole, all right? So when you look at a battery, and if you see that it has 3 fill holes for water or acid, 3 times 2 is 6, so that's a 6-volt battery. When you look at a 12-volt battery, you'll typically see 6 fill holes for the water, or I should say water, distilled water. And so what can happen is that because the cell here on this side of the battery, close to the negative terminal, can discharge a little differently than the cell closest to the positive terminal. All right? So what can happen is slight differences in voltage can start to occur in each of the 3 or 6 cells, or more, depending upon how big your battery pack is. But this is common across lead acid batteries. It also happens in lithium batteries, but the BMS takes care of that for you. You don't have to think about it. But in a lead acid battery, you need to equalize that. And so what equalization does is it really pushes a lot of electrons into the battery for a short amount of time. And what that does is it tends to bring all the cells in the battery up to a full charge state. and then it goes back into float mode. Okay, remember when you're charging a battery and you finish charging, that it goes into float. That equalization runs extra voltage to the battery and brings up the voltage in all the cells so they're more or less equal. You can find out what the status of the cells are with a hydrometer, with a battery hydrometer, to measure the specific gravity of it. Old gray guys like me and Tom probably remember or know what a hygrometer looks like. I'll pop one up here for you real quick. Here, let me just come back to there so you don't have to see all my noise here, because I have to go, I dig that up. It's over here, here, and then here, and then there. There we go. Oh, let's, all right, well, anyway, I'll clear this up in a minute, but that's basically a hygrometer battery tester. You stick the tube down in the cell, you suck a little bit of acid up into it, and it tells you the specific gravity of the battery, which essentially is tells you how many electrons, how much charge there is in the battery. They're really inexpensive. The one I just showed you is $9. And you can get those on my Amazon store. There's a link in the description below. You can visit Amazon through that link and go purchase whatever you'd like. I'll get a small commission. You'll pay the same price. And your support is greatly appreciated. So I recommend that when you're checking your water levels, you get your hygrometer out and just check your cells real quick and see what the charge state is between them. In the document that I finish, I'll give recommendations on when it's time to equalize based on the specific gravity. I don't have those numbers handy. I do have them in another document I'm working on, but I pulled this out as highlights to talk about tonight. But I don't remember the exact numbers. It's always a good idea to store any battery in a cool, dry place, and as we mentioned, keep them fully charged. Protecting against corrosion by cleaning the battery terminals is always a great idea, and you should do that at least once a year, probably every spring. And you can clean them with baking soda and water. You know, put a couple tablespoons of baking soda in a pint of water. Get yourself an old parts brush, you know, or something that you can put the baking soda and water solution on. Pull the terminals off, okay? Soak them up with some baking soda and water. That'll help clear the corrosion off. Then get yourself a wire brush and wire brush those terminals to get them all cleaned up, nice and shiny. Wire brush up the terminal connectors, make them all nice and shiny. By the way, I do have a video on my channel on maintaining your batteries. So if you'd like to learn more about how to maintain them, feel free to check out that video. We mentioned about over-discharging batteries, especially lead-acid batteries, being extremely harmful to the battery. Anytime you discharge your battery pack below 50%, you're decreasing the lifespan of that battery. Okay? The less you discharge the battery before you charge it again in a lead-acid, the longer the life of that battery will be. I know that was a mouthful, so let me explain. If you consistently only discharge your batteries to 70% of their capacity, they're going to last longer than if you consistently discharge those batteries to 50% of capacity. Remember, by over discharging the batteries, it kicks off the process called sulfation, which plugs up the lead plates in the battery and kills them. When we talk about using solar panels to keep your batteries charged, we're not talking about a solar system. We're not talking like an 1800 watt solar system sitting on your roof. That's overkill. What you need is just enough solar to keep the batteries topped off. Okay? Remember, a lead-acid battery, even if nothing is attached to it and drawing current from it, will be discharging at a small but measurable rate. So over a period of 6 months, a lead-acid battery that hasn't been used, that was put away at 13.6 volts, depending upon the age of the battery and a bunch of other things, but that battery, if it hasn't been used for 6 months, could be sitting at 12.6 volts, even with nothing attached to it. And that's caused because the chemical reactions in that battery continue to operate, although at a low level, even if the battery isn't connected. That's why when you store your batteries in the winter, you should take them inside if you live in a cold climate where it freezes. You should disconnect all the battery cables, do all that kind of stuff if you're going to leave them in your RV. And either with a solar panel battery maintainer, or if you have electricity wherever you store your RV, get yourself a battery maintainer, a charger, if you will. They're fairly inexpensive. A good one's 45 or 50 bucks. And charge your batteries, top them off, bring them up to float voltage, at least once a month. And that will help to extend the life of your flooded lead-acid battery considerably. But the expected lifespan on a flooded lead-acid battery and AGM is probably no more than 5 years. And that's if you've been really careful about the way you stored your batteries and so on and so forth. I went to buy a new battery for my car last summer. And I thought, well, I'll get a 5-year battery. I've always gotten 5-year batteries. And they're almost impossible to find now. I had to end up with a 3-year battery. And but I think the reason that is that that the batteries, just the chemistry themselves, and of course I think they're making them cheaper nowadays, as cheap as they possibly can, like everything, right? But they just couldn't get 5 years out of them, so they could only warranty them for 3. As we mentioned, throughout the summer, winter, spring, or fall, if it's in storage or whatever, you should monitor the battery health by checking each cell's voltage, by doing it with a specific gravity hydrometer. Okay. The thing about lithium is that they last a whole lot longer, because although they have a process similar to sulfation that goes on in them, that process isn't really related to the state of charge. It's related to the way the battery chemistry works in the first place. It's way much more information than I can share in a stream tonight. But I'll consider doing something on that particular issue later. But lithium batteries oftentimes will have much longer warranties and much higher number of cycles. When we talk about cycles, those are charge-discharge cycles. We'll assume 50%. Okay, we'll assume on your flooded lead-acid battery that we're discharging to 50%. And depending upon the battery and the environment it's in and all that stuff, you can probably expect somewhere between 600 and 700 charge-discharge cycles, which works out to about 3 years of average use, 4 or 5 years of average use. Whereas with a lead-acid battery, I've seen them guaranteeing 80% capacity after 2,000 charge cycles. In average use, gosh, that's 10 years, maybe more, depending upon how much and how you use your RV. So one of the advantages to lithium batteries is they'll have a much longer life cycle, because they're not as sensitive to being over discharged, because the battery management system will stop that from happening. The battery management system is there to protect the battery from damage. Overcharging, which causes them to catch on fire and blow up. Undercharging, which can kill the battery. And the battery management system also automatically will equalize charge the cells as needed. So the BMS is actually connected to each of the cells inside the battery, constantly monitoring them. If they start to get a little bit out of wonk, so that they're not balanced, then it'll automatically kick in and balance out the cells for you. You don't have to think about it in a lithium battery, in a well-manufactured lithium battery. And then all the other things still apply. Store it inside in cold weather, monitor the battery health. Of course, you're not going to monitor battery health in a lithium ion other than just checking the voltage. And then remember to keep it at about 50% charge state when it's not used for extended periods. Back to the chat. Let's see what kind of stuff is going on in the chat over here. And then we'll flip back to the document if things pop up that we need to refer to it to. Hi, John Besmix here. Good evening, John. Gary, let's see. Okay, part of a comment there. Did I miss something here? Tom Downey, batteries have been plugged in 50 amp to well over a year, no problems yet. Yeah, I think that on lithiums, as long as they're plugged in and basically at a charge state, that's typically not in storage. But if you're just sitting there with them floating, okay, that may not be the best method to extend and maximize the lifespan of the battery. Robert Black would like to see something on wire sizes for solar and chargers and converters. Excellent suggestion. Something that I would love to do. That topic is called wire ampacity. And it's fascinating and it's easy to figure out, and we will put that on the list, Robert. Excellent suggestion. Thank you, sir. Yeah, Tom says he does aircraft batteries too, so he must have the A tools. Yeah, I agree. Eric Myers, I need to replace some house battery cable ends and change some cables. My cables are about a 1/2 inch in diameter. Can I use cables like on a car? Okay, Eric, a 1/2 inch cable sounds like it's probably aught cable, 1/aught cable as they call it, or maybe double aught. Keep in mind, and it's totally counterintuitive, but the larger the number wire gauge, the smaller the wire itself. So a 16 gauge wire is tiny compared to a 1 gauge wire that may be the size of your thumb. Yes, they are essentially the same cables as are used in an auto, with maybe a slight difference in that the cables used in audio typically will have a silicone insulation cover on it. And the battery type cables oftentimes will have what they call THHN, or a different type of covering on the cable. Either way, that doesn't matter. That's really the only difference. When you say a 1/2 inch, my guess is a quick Google search will tell you, and that is this is the crux of what the question that Robert asked. Sorry, I was so yes, you can buy those cables pre-made. You can make them yourself. It's actually fairly easy. I would recommend Robert. Let's see. I'm sorry, Eric. How big is your inverter, Eric? Inverter, charger, converter. How many watts is your battery inverter? So, because that will help me give you an idea about what size cable to use, and then how far or how long are the cables. Yeah, Tim, you're dead on. 2-aught, 3-aught, 4-aught. I'm guessing, depending upon the size, he has 2-aughts, but the 4-aughts are, the size of my thumb. The copper. I don't know. Well, I don't have one here, but yeah, you can get those. You can buy them pre-made. And in 2 weeks, we will have a very detailed discussion about that. I'm going to add how to make a cable to that as well. The other question I have is do you have a battery type terminal lug on one end and a ring terminal on the other, or do you have ring terminals on both ends? Hey, thanks for looking those up, Tim. Yeah, 4-aught is the biggest. It's the biggest you're going to find usually in an RV situation. Tom Downey, yeah. Generally true. They do build the batteries to last a certain amount of time. I was just complaining that I couldn't get a 60-month battery anymore. Not even a Duracell or a Energizer, not Energizer. Come on, Sears battery, help me out. Come on, I got one. I just don't remember what they're called. It's the model that Sears used to sell, but now it's sold by AutoZone. George A.K.A. Dad says on his 83 BMW with 180,000 miles on it, he uses a battery minder. Caps loose, cells topped off with distilled water. Battery is years old. Yep. On my pickup that I haven't driven but twice all winter, I have a battery maintainer on it. Kevin Coop. Hopefully lithium batteries will be out of vogue soon. Tesla will be changing over to new ones. Yeah, there's a number of technologies out there related to battery chemistry that are really exciting. Was it Practical Engineering? Grady from Practical Engineering that is he the no? It's the other one I watch. What's his name? I'll think of it here in a minute. But there is a guy out there, very smart engineer type. Engineer is what he is, but he does a lot of videos on alternative energy and alternative energy storage and stuff like that. He's talked about sand batteries and salt batteries and sulfur, and lithium is the ion that is in vogue right now, but there are batteries out there that are developing that have much higher energy densities. And what energy density is simply a measure of how many electrons you can shove into that battery into a given space. And lithium batteries are much better at holding on to those electrons versus a lead acid battery or an AGM or even a NiCad. Just a quick, just a diehard, thank you, Robert. Just a quick commercial here as a reminder, your support of the channel through Amazon by visiting Amazon through the link in the video is super appreciated. I just can't thank you guys enough that do that. Also, a visit over to my website at trbullen.com. I've just published a couple new articles over there. One about a popular upgrade to RVs is suspensions, and I did a brief article about that. I also posted an article over there offering some tips to people who are either considering getting an RV or buying a new RV that have been based on conversations we've had here and your help. And so that's always greatly appreciated as well. And if you would take a quick trip over there and check out the articles on my website. Support, subscribe, like, share. All of those social things is also very helpful and greatly appreciated, as are your thumbs up. Okay, so we had a question come in earlier, and I rolled off of it real quick, and I want to run back to it. Let me see if I can pick that up. Okay, Scotty asks, he's looking for a solid way to attach brace up a telescopic Harbor Freight flagpole to the front of the fifth wheel kingpin, not finding much on the internet so far. I haven't seen much. The issue you're going to run into, and it can be done. I know a fellow that used to park, that was parked next to me at Ocotillo Wells, California, a number of years ago, had done that with his fifth wheel. And what he had done is he had got conduit straps, and he had drilled holes and was using bolts and screws and 2 or 3 of these conduit straps to hold the pole to the front of the hitch, the fifth wheel gooseneck hitch, if you will. The issue with that is that you're only holding a very small amount of the bottom of that pole. And I would always worry about, unless it was a very durable setup, that would break down there, because there's going to be a lot of stress. You got a huge amount of stress. You know, if you got 15 feet of pole sitting up here and you got 10 inches of support down here, right there at that top, where that top clamp is, that's going to cause some issues, and it may break. Which is probably why they're not very prevalent, is that it's difficult. The ones I have seen that are really prevalent and they look really cool are the ones that go underneath the tire. And they would work on any rig. And so it's a flat plate with a round tube on it that you can stick your flagpole in, but the tire sits on top of the plate, and that acts to keep the pole and the plate to the ground. But I have not seen one like that, Scotty. I don't think they're that popular. George says March 1st, a lot of their fellow RF snowbirders headed north. Prices for food and other necessities dropped. Yeah, but then didn't all the spring breakers come in and start shooting at each other? And, what was it? Miami's got a curfew now. You can't buy liquor in the liquor store after 6 and that kind of stuff. Like that's going to stop anybody. They're going to go get it at 3:30 when they get out of bed. All right, enough politicizing. I try to stay away from political stuff. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Autocorrect is a pain. I agree, Tom. Die Hard. Yep, thanks. Xantrex came with the RV, making the cables is no problem. The lengths are 3 feet or less. The terminals are ring type. Okay, so yeah, you can buy those. 4/0 are very hard to source unless you have, like a welding store. But finding 3-foot 4/0 with lugs on them might be hard. If you had a welding store, that's a good place to get the cable as well. But you can buy kits on Amazon, and they come with, and I've done this myself, they come with the ring terminals, they come with the cable, they come with the heat shrink with adhesive in it, which is really what you want. That keeps the corrosion from getting up and underneath the heat shrink tubing. You could make 4 cables 3 feet long for probably $90 of parts and material off of Amazon. The only trick is that you need a crimp tool. The ones that I found that work the best, if you're only going to be making a few cables, are the crimp tools that you use a hammer with. So you put the lug in with the wire and everything, set it on a good firm surface, and you mash it with a hammer, and it crimps the lug in place. The hydraulic ones are expensive. They work really well. But I wouldn't spend my money on a hydraulic one. You can go old-fashioned and solder them. The issue is that I tried that one time, and by the time I got everything hot enough for this solder to wick appropriately, I'd melted the heck out of the insulation on the cable. So and I preheated the lugs, I preheated the cable, I did everything, but yeah, I ended up melting the cable. So I kind of gave up on soldering them. Although a solder joint is the best, in my humble opinion. Tom says, by the time I need new batteries, I'll be too old to worry about it. I got it. Robert Black was in automotive for years, and always thought the 5-year batteries, you were just paying more for the warranty. They're the same as the 3-year. That might be true too, right? It might be true too. Gary D says, remember our phones never quit. Ma Bell had some great batteries. Yeah, they were lead acid, and there was a whole room full of them, and they were strung up in 48 to output 48 volts. I've done a lot of work in central offices. In fact, I worked on a project that involved a problem in a central office. A shunt trip breaker flipped out, took the whole central office down, and the failover failed, and it was a mess, and an area was out of long distance service for 2 days. And oh yeah, but I worked on that project. So, but those batteries that you find in the central office are like the batteries you would find in a locomotive, the starting batteries in a locomotive. And they are 2.5, 3 feet by 2.5, 3 feet by 4 or 5 feet. And there is a whole room full of them to keep the central office going when the power goes out. And they are required by law because the telephone service is known as a life safety service. By the way, cell phones are not life safety devices. However, emergency services can get cell phones from AT&T, Verizon, and some of the other national carriers that are hardened. In other words, they have battery backup, they have generation, they have all of those sorts of things to keep them working. But even that, just ask Ben, who is a regular viewer and was involved in repairing the radio network in southern, in Florida after the last hurricane. Ben Imby, I should say. He can tell you about the hardening of the state of emergency communications, and it's a lot less than what you might expect. Yeah, muffler clamp used to work back to back. Yep, that's a good idea too. Yeah, got you, Scotty. Totally get it. Both Miami and Fort Myers businesses are fed up with the cost of damages during spring break. What I saw on the TV sure isn't like Where the Boys Are, the movie from the 60s that a lot of you guys will probably remember. Oh, yeah. I just saw it. Tom says our Ace Hardware does the crimp for us. Some parts stores will rent tools, and you might check with a local parts store. They might have a crimp tool that they would let you borrow. Tim suggests that Rebel battery makes up battery cables. Not sure if he has 4-aught or not. I would be surprised if he doesn't. I'm assuming that's an online website, Tim. Eric, I would not go with smaller cables. I would stick with what's there as close as possible. And by the way, the cable should be marked. So along the cable, the length of the cable should be the gauge, the insulation material, a part number, and other stuff that the manufacturer at his option may add to it. But the gauge should be written on the cable. Do not go with smaller cables. You could generate a heat issue by drawing too much juice through the cables, and heat leads to fire, leads to a bad day. So I would not go smaller. I would stick with the same size cables as are there. All right. That looks like we're at the end. Let me scan back. Did I miss questions in the chat here tonight? Again, as always, if you're shy and you don't want to put them in the chat, that's fine. Send me an email at trbolin@gmail.com. I really like getting the emails because that way we can kind of work it out. And if it's really interesting and I think it might be useful and valuable to the folks that join us on the stream, then I'll bring it and share it on the stream. Thank you, Tim, for that link. Oh, I was going to share a link to Gary's channel. Just a minute. So our friend Gary D, that's been on the chat here, is been working on some videos. He just posted one. I didn't get a chance to watch it yet, but I did see it post about a 2,000 watt inverter that he was playing with. And Gary's done some fun projects with solar and stuff on his rig, and so you might go over and check out his channel. Yukon Jack Man, huh? Does that mean you like Yukon Jack? I used to drink that when I was a kid. I haven't drank it for years. Most of the time, the hardest thing I drink now is raspberry tea. Well, I drink coffee in the mornings, but the doctor said 12 cups of coffee a day was too much. What does she know? Eric says, I've been spring break in Fort Lauderdale. I didn't know it was spring break when I left Michigan. Damn it, I had my girlfriend. Yeah. You mean I'm the only one that remembers where the boys are? Who was in that? We're kind of at the end here, so unless there's other questions that come in, we'll doodle around here for a minute. Let's see, that was Paula Prentice. Come on, help me out, guys. I remember Paula Prentice because I just loved her. She was also in In Harm's Way, and she was in a number of movies, but yeah, those two come to mind. And then the little blonde gal in that movie was, come on, I'll think of it in a minute. You know, I tell you that these gray hairs suck all your memory cells right out of your head. Connie Francis, thank you. Judy White says, can I mention anything about routine electrical maintenance such as torquing electrical breakers, bus bars, removing outlets to retorque? Sure, Judy. I think in general, probably not necessary on a regular basis, but maybe as a part of a spring maintenance or a fall go to bed setup, that might not be a bad idea. Typically, the breakers and the outlets, if they were installed at the factory, were torqued well enough that they shouldn't come loose. Now, shouldn't, I guess, there's a waffle word there, right? But they're typically torqued so that they don't come loose. But it's not a bad idea with all of the power turned off to torque the breakers and stuff like that. It's a lot of work to pull each outlet out and retorque the screws on the outlets. So that might be a tad overkill. But yeah, I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt, but I don't know if we would need to do that once a year. Maybe once every 3 years on the outlets. You're going to know pretty fast on outlets if there's a loose connector, because it's probably going to start tripping a GFCI on the circuit somewhere. And if you can't track down what's tripping a GFCI on a circuit, then start looking for loose connections and loose terminals on outlets. Tim Meyer says, I just need a bigger cup and you will have less cups a day. Yeah, Scotty, that's a good point. Don't over torque the breakers. They will strip out very easy. Ask me how I know. I have a cable tool you beat on with the sledge. Yeah, that's the crimp tool I was talking about. Okay, I hate acronyms. Alrighty, we're at 7:56. I usually try to keep these to an hour. I know there's a bit of latency out there on the stream, so I'll hang for just a minute, and you can bring your questions in. And that's a good point, Eric. Let's go back. Judy said she lost an outlet to it being loose, almost had a fire. A definite possibility. Quality control, and we've talked about this before, and quality control, the further we get into this century, the more disappointed I get on it. Even the quality coaches seem to be starting to have an increase in the number of issues around quality control. I wish I could come out and say these rigs you should check regularly. It's not a bad idea to check every outlet occasionally. I can't, I just don't see every year. That's a lot of work to go around and pull out every outlet. But things like that happen, things like what happened to Judy happen. And Kevin Coop, you're absolutely right. Many electrical receptacles in RV and are junk and have no screws. Excuse me. And I had a couple like that in my Class A, and there was a couple like that in the truck camper. Well, is the operative term there. I got rid of them and put in real good Leviton outlets. Eric says he had a GFCI that kept tripping, changed it out, problem fixed. Yeah, sometimes GFCIs just fail. Sometimes if there's loose connection along the string that has a GFCI on it, sometimes they'll trip. Those sorts of things. Yes, Judy, that sounds about right. 14 to 16 inch-pounds sounds about right. Kevin says, yep. And that sounds good. Good night, Tom. Yep. Appreciate you. Gary C. says, I have two Group 31 batteries, 100 amp hours. Do I have 200 amp hours? No, sir. Well, yes, you do, but you only have 100 amp hours usable if they're lead acid, because you never want to draw them below 50% of capacity. So although you might have 200 amp hours of total battery capacity in a lead acid battery pack, you only have 100 amp hours of usable capacity, which is one of the other reasons why lithium batteries are so superior to lead acid. Because a lithium battery, again, if it's a 100 amp hour lithium battery, they deliver 100 amp hours before they shut off. Good night, John. It was great to have you here tonight. Tom Downey, Newmar is the best example. They no longer answer questions. Thor bad. Absolutely true. I heard that as well. That Newmar will not answer questions on their older rigs. And that is just so disappointing. So disappointing. I called them a number of times on my 2004. Always got good support, good answers, and was quite surprised and very happy. But yeah, but that's Thor for you. Kevin Coop, Judy, 12 to 14 inch-pounds. If number 12, definitely 14. Thanks, Kevin. That's good to know. Okay. Last call for questions on this fine Tuesday evening. Remember, next week, we're going to be talking about what you can and can't carry across the border when you cross to and from the U.S. from either Mexico or Canada. The following week will probably be all about wire ampacity and how and why to check to select wires of a certain size. Something that's really important when you're working on electrical in your RV. And so, yeah, that's going to be a very fascinating topic, and I look forward to doing that one. And any other topics that people want to throw in, you're welcome to put them in the chat, send me an email, leave a comment on this video if you watch it after, because it does get quite a few views after the fact during the week of people who come back and watch it when they can't. I know there are a bunch of guys and gals that watch it, during the week after Tuesday night because they can't make it for whatever reason. So, anyway, sounds good. Last call. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Gary, Kevin, John, Tom, Scotty, Gary, everybody else, Kevin, Eric. So nice to have you guys all here tonight. And be sure and share. Let your friends know what we do here on Tuesday nights. They might find some value in it. Until we get together next week, we're going to call this one in the can. Thanks so much for watching. Peace. See you next week.